Hey there, my name is Krystal Everdeen, and today I'm going to show you how I made this mandala slash granny squared crochet top. And to be honest, I made this top because I originally made a mandala crochet purse, which I really liked, but I would keep it on my chair and I accidentally sat on it, destroying it, so I had to unravel it. And I know how much you guys hate when I unravel my projects, but it just had to be done. However, I couldn't just unravel this mandala, and I thought, how could I salvage this beautiful mandala, because I do really like the way it came out, and I love the colors, and I just didn't want to unravel it, and I thought, hey, what if I try to make a crochet top out of it? That being said, with most of my tutorials, but especially this one, I am just winging it. As I'm filming, I'm just trying to figure out as I go along, so it might not be the most fluid tutorial you'll ever see. I don't even want to call this a tutorial. It's just a video on how I made this top, and maybe you can recreate it yourself. But anyway, that's enough backstory. Let's get started. So I of course started off with my mandala that I again had left over from my crochet mandala purse that I unraveled. So I needed to figure out what the heck I'm going to do with this, because I don't want to unravel this as well. I already put too many colors into it and too much time into it, and it still looks pretty cool. So I wanted to transform it into a crochet top. But the thing is, I would need to make it square instead of keep it round. And obviously I'm not going to be able to use these scallops here, so I unraveled the last row of the mandala, which would be these scallops. So if you would want to make this exact design, the first step for you would be to make this mandala, which you can do by following my multicolored mandala purse tutorial, but obviously just make the mandala and not the entire purse. And that would be super easy, because that tutorial will go into detail as to exactly what to do to make this design, and it also comes with a written pattern. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. I'll link that video in the description box below. Okay, so the very first thing that I need to figure out with this is how to make this square, because I cannot make a round blouse. So I decided to stretch out the areas I want to make corners and make the mandala kind of square-shaped as I could by just stretching it. And then I attached some yarn to my project and began by chaining 2 or 3. I don't recall. Let's see, 1 and 2 and... is that it? Yes. So I chained 2, and then I began my very first row with a double crochet. And a double crochet, if you're not familiar, is yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through a stitch, yarn over through 2 loops, and yarn over through the last 2 loops. And if you are a beginner to crochet, I would not recommend this project, because again, it is a mess because it was not necessarily planned or well thought out. I am totally making everything up as I go along. So from here, I am just crocheting my way across the mandala until I reach the stitch I want to make a corner stitch. And once I reach that stitch, I make it significant by creating 3 double crochets within that one stitch. So this is a stitch I want to make a corner stitch. So I'm going to make 1, 2, 3 double crochets within that one stitch. And now it's more of a significant stitch, and it looks more like a corner stitch as opposed to all the other stitches, because there's more stitches in it. I don't know, it's hard to explain why I'm doing this, but if you have ever seen my granny square tutorial, you know that making more stitches inside of a corner stitch is really important, and that's what makes it a corner. Otherwise, you're just making a circle. So yeah. Okay, so from that corner stitch, I'm just going to continue down the mandala with double crochet until I reach the next stitch that I want to make a corner stitch. And once I reach that, then I'm going to make 3 double crochets inside of that stitch and then continue on throughout the mandala to the other stitch I want to make a corner stitch, and then make 3 double crochets inside of that stitch, and then finally work my way across the very last row of the mandala until I reach the very first stitch that I made for this row, and then just slip stitch into it. And there you go, I'm done with the very first row that's not originally part of the mandala. And now it totally looks more square, a little bit more square, which is good. I mean, it's difficult to make something that was originally round square, especially just on the first row, but I think it did a pretty good job. So from here, I'm going to essentially start making granny squares, kind of. Pretty much going to resemble making granny squares. Anyway, you might not even know what a granny square is, so I'll just tell you what I'm doing here. So from where I left off, I am making 3 extended double crochets inside of 1 stitch, and then since this is going to be a corner stitch, I decided to chain 2 and then create another cluster of extended double crochets inside of the same stitch. Now I would normally do this for every corner row, but I did mess up right here because this is the very first stitch of the row, and you're not supposed to do this even if it's a corner stitch. You're only supposed to make 1 cluster of extended double crochets. And if you have seen my tutorials on how to make granny squares, you'll notice that yes, that is indeed a mistake, but you know, oh well. I didn't want to unravel the whole thing because I messed up in the beginning, especially if it's not that much of a big deal, but I just wanted to point it out. So after making that first cluster of the row, then I chained 1, skipped 2 stitches, made another cluster of 3 extended double crochets, chained 1, skipped 2 stitches, then in the 3rd stitch I made another cluster of 3 extended double crochets, and 3, and then I chained 1, skipped 2 stitches. In that 3rd stitch I created 3 extended double crochets, and so on and so forth, and this is what it should start to look like. So what I'm going to do is continue with that pattern until I reach this corner stitch right here, and in these corner stitches I'm going to do what I did for that very first stitch, which I actually messed up on, but whatever. So yeah, chain 1, skip 2 stitches, and then 3 extended double crochets inside of 1 stitch until I reach the corner stitch. And now that I'm at the corner stitch, I'm going to again create 3 extended double crochets inside of 1 stitch. However, the difference is that since this is a corner stitch, I am also going to chain 2 and then create another cluster of 3 extended double crochets inside of the same stitch, so the corner stitches look like little open shell stitches. If you have not been on my channel, you must be so confused with all this terminology because I make up all of this terminology. I don't actually know real terminology because I am self-taught, and I don't mean like I watch YouTube videos and, you know, read books self-taught. I mean, I sit in a room alone and just figure it out. I just figure things out. That's what I mean by self-taught. And that's why my videos are different than probably any other tutorials that you'll ever watch. So yeah, I completed this row by again slip stitching into the very first cluster that I made for this row, and now row 2 is complete and it looks much more square than before, so yay. So that was obstacle number 1, and now obstacle number 2 is trying to figure out how in the world I'm going to make this a halter shape. And I did contemplate how to do this for a little while, but I finally figured it out. I'm just going to keep creating granny squares along the sides here and just make them smaller and smaller as I keep going. And what I mean by that is, well, I'll just show you. From the bottom here, I'm going to chain 3 and then create a cluster of 3 extended double crochets inside of 1 stitch, and then chain 2 and then reach over to the next opening. Did I chain 2 or did I chain 1? And chain 2. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to reach over to the big opening right here and create a cluster of 3 extended double crochets, and then I'm going to chain 2 and then create another cluster of 3 extended double crochets inside of the next opening until I get to the second to last opening. And again, make sure that this is going to be the second to last opening that you're going to stop on, and you don't finish up the entire row, because we want to make this a halter shape, and in order to make it a halter shape, we need to decrease in each row. So again, I stopped at the second to last opening, and then I chained 4 and then went back on my project and just created clusters in every single opening till I got to the bottom with chain 2 in between. So this is 2 extended double crochet, 3 extended double crochet inside of that opening, and then I chained 2, and then I reached over to the next opening and then created another cluster of 3 extended double crochets until I got to the very bottom, making sure to go into all of the openings every time I'm going towards the bottom. It's only when you're going up the top where you're going to only go into up to the second to last opening, because again, you want each row to be smaller and smaller. So right here you can already see that I essentially did not complete the entire row, and I also should have probably like slip stitched or something so I could make this a little bit more seamless, but oh well, we'll do that for the next couple of rows. Okay, so from here, I'm going to stop right here, the second to last opening, and then work my way down, and then the next row I'm going to stop here, and then the next row I'm going to stop here, and then here, and yeah, it's going to be smaller and smaller each row, and it's going to create what I call a little wing, and that's what we're working on right now. We're working on the wings of this top. So from here, I'm going to chain 4 and then reach over to the next opening and create my cluster of extended double crochets until I get to the second to last opening, and then from there I'm going to slip stitch into the previous row's cluster, flip the project over, chain 4, and then work my way back down the top and making sure I go into all of the openings, not skipping anything. And this is what the project looks like so far. You can see that I am decreasing in each row, and what I mean by that is basically I'm skipping the very last stitch of the row, which makes each row smaller and smaller because I'm only going up to the second to last opening as opposed to completing the entire row. And that's exactly what you want. It does look kind of weird for the first couple rows, but then as you keep going, it should start looking more and more like this, which is exactly what you want. And finally, I am on to my very last row, which really only is going into one opening. And once I complete that last row, I'm done with my little wing and with half of this top. So now what I'm going to do is granny square my way down the bottom of the top to the other side and then do the exact same thing on the other side, making the second wing. So since this is a corner opening, I'm going to make another cluster of extended double crochets within the same exact opening, and then from there I'm just going to chain 2 and then create more clusters until I reach the other side of the top. And once I do, then I'm going to do the exact same thing and make a little wing by making clusters all the way to the second to last opening, and then working my way back down, and then go back up to the second to last opening, and then go back down, and so on and so forth, until the project looks like this, in which you're almost done. So from here, I wanted to not only smooth out the edges here, but I also wanted to make the straps. So every time I reach this point, I'm going to make a strap, and then I'm going to reach this point, and I'm going to make a strap, and then I'm going to single crochet my way down. So I granny squared my way across the bottom of the top, single crocheted my way up the side of the top, and then once I reached the point where I wanted to make the strap, I made a strap of 150 chains, and then after my 150 chains, I went back on it with a slip stitch just to make the chain a little bit thicker so it doesn't dig into my neck. And then from there, I single crocheted my way across to the other side to make the second strap. And then once I made the second strap of, again, 150 chains, I went back on that chain with a slip stitch. And after I went back on that chain with a slip stitch, I single crocheted my way down the side of the top all the way to the bottom. And once I did that, I was completely done with crocheting the top. So from here, I just needed to determine which side was going to be the back, and I decided that this side was going to be the back. So with the back side facing me, I grabbed one strap and reached it over to the opposite side and attached it to the top portion of the bottom of the top. And then I stretched it across the opposite side once again and attached it to the bottom portion of the bottom of the top. And then I grabbed my second strap and did the exact same thing, just on the opposite side. So I stretched it over to the opposite side and attached it to the top portion of the bottom of the top. And then I stretched it across to the opposite side one last time to attach it to the bottom portion of the bottom of the top. And then after I was done with that, then I was completely done with the top. And it was time for me to try it on and see if this looked good at all. And I was pleasantly surprised that it actually looked pretty good. And I was glad that I was able to repurpose the mandala pattern and kind of salvage that whole unfortunate situation and come out with a pretty good looking top. I guess one of the only things I wish I could have done differently was I wish I could have added a little bit more tan yarn to the design. That way it would have kept with the multicolor changing back and forth look. But at least this brings more attention to the center, which I guess is cool. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how it looks, and I'm just glad that I was able to salvage that mandala. Well, thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, found it interesting, entertaining, or helpful, please help me out by giving it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And also, don't forget to check out the rest of my channel because I have a ton of other really cool crochet projects and tutorials ranging from beginner friendly to a little more complicated, but nonetheless really interesting and cool, and I would love to share with you guys. I think that you'll have a lot of fun. Well, thanks again for stopping by. I hope you stick around, so don't forget to click that red subscribe button if you have not already, so I can see you next time. Bye!